Welcome to Let's Talk About Cannabis and Healthcare. My name is Drudys, and I am your host. Today is session 5, and over the last few years, honestly, I've been doing a lot of research on why we can't see cannabis like in our healthcare systems. And we know that these patients exist. 30% of adults have reported the use of cannabis in their daily lives, and it only appears in about 0.4% of medical records. So, as a clinician, that became a concern, and with courageous curiosity, started looking into it. And it's not just cannabis, honestly. Like, healthcare has a visibility problem. There's a lot of things that we can't see about the entire human experience. And if we can't see it, we can't capture it or evaluate it or track common human behaviors with the current infrastructure that we have. We don't have the language, we don't have the data fields, the workforce doesn't have the knowledge to address this huge gap. So here we are, starting the conversation about what we can do and what we're able to see in a way that's measurable, trackable, and safe so that we can implement cannabis into healthcare. So today, from disclosure to documentation, building the data infrastructure that healthcare needs, I'm bringing to the stage Mr. Justin Buck. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to introduce you because we're continuing our exploration of a question that has emerged throughout this entire series. And it really is, how can we manage something it cannot see? And cannabis is like the perfect case study because it's kicked the door wide open, especially with the recent rescheduling of medical cannabis to Schedule 3. Like, that means this Schedule 3 medication is in our healthcare systems. So over the last several weeks, we spent like time discussing patient disclosure, stigma, education, kind of like the challenges that were created when cannabis existed outside of the healthcare system, and how we have a lot of challenges. And today we get to talk to you. And because addressing disclosure and education is not enough. A patient can disclose cannabis, and if that information is never documented or measured or analyzed or incorporated into decision making, we basically remain blind in healthcare and in science. So, Justin is going to help us today think about what comes next. I'm honored to have you here with us today. Justin Buck is a medical cannabis scientist, an educator, a technologist, and an entrepreneur dedicated to advancing evidence based cannabis education and research. He's earned his master's degree in medical cannabis science and therapeutics from the University of Maryland School of Pharmacy, where he also contributed to the development of a medical cannabis curriculum that ultimately earned continuing medical education credits at the Walter Reed National Medical Center. Today, he serves as the CEO and co founder of Cannabase AI, a platform that houses thousands of peer reviewed cannabis studies while helping institutions, educators, clinicians, and organizations have access to evidence based cannabis science. Beyond research and education, Justin is also helping explore how technology, data systems, and emerging AI tools can support more informed decision making in cannabis and healthcare. So, again, I'm beyond honored to have you here with us, Justin. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to Let's Talk About Cannabis and Healthcare.
Thank you, Judith, for having me. I'm very excited to be here and talk about my favorite topic. So yeah, I'm ready to get into it today, and thank you for the introduction.
No doubt, no doubt. So, I always like to start with the story of like kind of what got you into this work. So, tell us a little bit about yourself, your path into this work, and like what first made you realize that cannabis deserved more scientific attention.
Yeah, so for myself, I really knew nothing about the plant until I got to college. And so 2014 for me was when I started college at Morehouse College. And so that's when, just like college campuses today, cannabis is found on these campuses. And so that was my first introduction to it. It was socially, but I think for myself, what I realized was that, as you know, it was a social thing, that there was times where it was social, but I also was using it, and I was doing my schoolwork and studying. And so what ended up learning was that before I knew it was a medical thing for me, it was a medical thing because it quiets a lot of the distractions for me. So for me, it gives me tunnel vision and focus when I'm trying to complete a task. And so I think that that appears for me in when I'm listening to music, or when I have to focus on a task. Like, I'm very focused on the thing at hand. And present in the moment. And so for me, that's when I realized that cannabis was more than something that was recreational, because I really enjoyed how it centered my focus, and just like, we'll talk about it in a second, but homeostasis is what I really, looking back on it, was what I was feeling. And so I was a very active student. So I had several leadership positions. I was running around campus. I was on an academic scholarship, so I needed to have my grades at a certain level. So all of these things, it was just a lot of, and then just the pressure of being a Morehouse man, going away from home. I'm from Maryland originally, so living in Atlanta, Georgia, for the first time ever away from family, along with just like my high expectations of being a good student. It was a lot, and so for myself, I used it on the evening times when I'm working and then I'm about to go to sleep. And so for myself, once I made that transition from social to this actually something that helps me, I my curiosity got the best of me. So I was during summer, during things like that, off time, I would spend time watching documentaries, and so that was something that I found myself doing a lot. And so I just was really, really interested in it, and just continued to have that curiosity. And then when I graduated school, I moved to Denver, and started doing more, just being in that space, those industries, learning from different people, talking to different people, while I had my full-time job out there in Denver. But that had nothing to do with cannabis. But I was out there to work, but also study the industry and see, what I wanted to do with my future. And so from there, I went to school to study it, and the rest is history. So it really just started out of pure curiosity, from a 20-year-old kid. So
No, I love that. I mean, I hear you, and the undertone of it is that the intentional consumption what started as something social became a very intentional thing because of your awareness and your curiosity in your body. And that perfectly aligns with how I kind of like my cannabis journey. I started as a patient because I had severe postpartum. And then
uh,
when I achieved that homeostasis, I was able to say, hey, it also helps with this, it also helps with that. And then I became my own, test subject. And I started like trying to be intentional and started exploring, um, you know, the other types of consumption and other minor cannabinoids. And I think that that's really important to understand. But I think one of the things that you and I and our curiosity had was like to start at the beginning. So if I were to go back and say, before we get into the data infrastructure, I want to kind of make sure that everybody has a foundational understanding of why this matters, right? And maybe you can take us to like high level, the endocannabinoid system 101. What is it? How does it work? Why does it exist? What is like give us like the basic.
yeah, absolutely. I would love to do that. So yeah, the endocannabinoid system. What I like to talk about it as, it's the system that we didn't get taught, in schools. We learn all about digestive, skeletal, nervous, endocrine, all of these different systems. But there's many different things that happen. And when I say things, I mean medical conditions, symptoms, things like that, that happen all throughout the body. And a lot of people don't know, like, what is the root cause of that. And a lot of that has to do with just imbalance in the body. So let me just break it down what the endocannabinoid system is. So the endocannabinoid system consists of four major things. And so you have your receptors. Um, so you have the receptors. So you have a CB1 and CB2 receptors. So these receptors are located in your brain, and also in every organ and throughout your entire body. But they're very different. So you have the CB1 receptor. That's going to be the receptor that THC, which is the thing that gets us high, that's going to be what THC is going to be mostly attaching to, is the CB1 receptor. And the CB1 receptor is going to be located in your brain and your central nervous system. And so your brain and your central nervous system, that's where you're going to find your CB1 receptors, and then that's where the THC attaches to. Now, the CB2 receptors, they can also be attached as well by THC, but they're mainly attached or they're mainly used or located in the peripheral. So they're located in the peripheral system, but also all throughout your organs, your fingers, your legs, everywhere. And so this is why cannabis is so um, unique, because our bodies receive it in so many different ways because of the receptors are located all around our body. And so this is why also too, when you have maybe something going on in one system, why something in another system might also go awry, is because the entire body is connected through the endocannabinoid system. CB1 receptors are the most prevalent receptor in the brain. So we have a bunch of different receptors, right, that help us do everyday things, but CB1 receptor is the most, it's the most prolific receptor in our brains. And so this is something that a lot of people don't know. And we also have endocannabinoids. So just like we have cannabinoids that live outside of our body. So the THC, the CBD, those are cannabinoids that we call exogenous. So those live outside of our body. So endo, the word endo just means inside. So what people don't understand is that these receptors that I just talked about, yes, THC attaches to those receptors, but you also have uh, molecules inside of your body called endocannabinoids that attach to those receptors. And that is happening a lot more than the cannabinoids are if unless you're a chronic smoker. And so what those two molecules, anandamide and 2-AG, they help because they're cannabis. They mimic what cannabis mimics what these actually look like inside of our body. So anandamide attaches to CB1 because that is actually what we feel when we are doing things that contribute to our survival. And so there's three major things that we do to keep the human race going that our body rewards us for, our endocannabinoid system rewards us for. And so that is eating and drinking. So whenever we eat, whenever we drink, you do feel, some type of satisfaction, especially if you're dehydrated or hungry. When you have sex, so a lot of people, when I say that, they make a face or something, but they act like we will not die. Like as a human race, if we don't have sex, we will eventually die off. And
Mhm.
so that's why we have a cocktail of molecules that release that make us feel good, and a part of that is anandamide. So anandamide is being released, right? And then also physical activity. So you have social physical activity, you have eating, exercising, you have sex, all these different things, right? So these are things that we need to continue, right? And so, like for example, runner's high, right? A lot of that is serotonin and dopamine, but you also have anandamide being released as well. So when you think of anandamide, the word is a Sanskrit word, it means bliss. And so that's why anandamide is going to be the endocannabinoid, right? The cannabinoid that lives inside of our body that is going to be similar, most similar to THC. And that's when we also experience like quote unquote runner's high, right? Or when you have a really good exercise, right? And things like that. That is what the endocannabinoid system is contributing to. But then you have the CB2 receptors, right? That are live in your fingers, your arms, your limbs, your organs, intestines, all over the place, right? So then you have 2-AG, which is another endocannabinoid that lives inside of our body. But though that endocannabinoid is mostly going to be attaching to the CB2 receptor. And then so the CB2 receptor is mostly going to be for immune response and things like that. And so that's where you have cannabinoids, terpenes, things like that attaching to those CB2 receptors that can help with a myriad of different health issues, and it has anti-inflammatory, all types of health benefits. And then you have the enzymes that break all of it down. And so those are the main components. So even like endocannabinoids that get released inside of our body, they still need to be broken down, metabolized, and excreted outside of the body. So those are the components. You have the CB1 and CB2 receptor. You have the cannabinoids, and then you have the enzymes that break it down. And so all of those things make up the endocannabinoid system, and they all control different functions within the body. So it controls a lot, it controls mood, regulation, sleep, different things like that. But at the end of the day, it controls homeostasis. And the last thing that I'll say about it is, when I'm talking about homeostasis, is I like to use the example like fight or flight mode. So if you are, for example, like just in a life or death situation, say you're in a car accident, but you are physically fine, or even a better one, if you get robbed or something like that, you're in a life or death situation, the adrenaline is going to be through the roof. And then once you get yourself out of that situation, it's not healthy for all of your levels and adrenaline to be elevated and high, right? So that's when your endocannabinoid system is going to then release anandamide and 2-AG, just to bring you down back to homeostasis. And ultimately, that's what cannabis does as well. And that's why the system and the actual plant go together very, very well, because we do have a system that mimics cannabis already inside of our bodies.
Wow. I knew that, but you laid it on. And I, as a scientist, I appreciated that because in my mind, I'm thinking healthcare professionals need to know it exists. It need to know how it works. They need to understand metabolism because that's how our medications work. They need to understand drug interactions. Just from like the education, if this is in our bodies and we are creating it, there's a lot that we need to have basic understanding of to be able to like deliver care for those patients and truly keep them safe. And I'm gonna like challenge you to help me think like what is the number one thing that healthcare executives, anybody like that's listening to us today, like if they can remember one thing about the ECS, like what should it be?
That it's connected to the entire body. So there's a lot of times where, um, you might have a symptom, and then that symptom affects something else in your body, or like you might have a medical condition, um, and that medical condition spurs another symptom in another body, and it's hard because the medical space right now, right, is rightfully so, it's segmented, right? So you have specialists for each part of the body. And so a lot of time patients right now, they will go see um their regular doctor, but at the same time, or they may go see a specialist, but then other symptoms happen in other parts of the body where they need to go see another specialist. And so for me, uh, a lot of that is disruption within the endocannabinoid system, and not actually the medical condition that's being treated. And so the body is interconnected through the endocannabinoid system. And so I would just for myself, uh, for medical practitioners, to just like, I think the main thing that they can do is just educate themselves on the endocannabinoid system, because it will help them diagnose certain things. And so, like for example, right now, I see a lot of different things, just from cannabis use, that practitioners aren't able to diagnose. Like for example, we have cannabis hyperemesis syndrome right now. And so that's outside of the endocannabinoid system, but understanding the endocannabinoid system and how it works, you might be able to better understand when you need to diagnose somebody with that, instead of, running a bunch of different CAT scans and things like that, by asking the right questions, and not being afraid to ask your patients about cannabis use. Even if you are not extremely well educated on it. I think it's uh you're doing a disservice by not getting all the information. Like you said earlier, you said 0.4% or something like that was on medical records. And
Mhm.
so, and we know that that is inaccurate. And a part of that is on the medical practitioner. You need to ask and then make them feel comfortable, because I'm a patient myself, right? So sometimes I don't feel comfortable, but when I know when it's something that has to do with my health, I just say, this is what I do, because I try to just give them all of the information possible so that they don't miss something with me. But there's a lot of people that aren't able to do that because they don't want to, or they work a job that drug tests. There's so many different things, right? And so you need to have, I think, just the knowledge of the endocannabinoid system, and then make the decision that you're going to have discretion with your patients. And so
No,
those are
absolutely.
two things I think that are missing. Yeah.
No, yeah, and I think we've discovered, and we've talked a lot about in this series, is kind of like encouraging patients to disclose. Project Destigmatize Healthcare, the nonprofit I founded, is doing research, and the survey is called the Cannabis and Healthcare Experience Survey, and it's trying to capture like where exactly the friction is in disclosure. Are we disclosing? Do you feel safe to disclose? Do you feel respected and with dignity? Do you feel like that information is going to be used for relevant medical decisions rather than stigmatizing and labeling your medical record? And we're seeing that people are disclosing, and somehow it's still not ending up in the chart, at least here in Massachusetts and
Wow.
part of the nations that we've been able to capture. And I think a lot of the disclosure conversations, and again, I am also a patient, so my disclosure conversations also end up with me doing some education and teaching to my practitioner. But I think patients should feel safe to come into a healthcare system that understands all of them, not just pieces of them. Especially now, since we have a medication that's kind of entered the chat, we really need to get beyond disclosure. The other part is disclosure sometimes create an unknown bias. There's like the Information Bureau that collects all your information, and insurance are able to share medical record data, and they're able to kind of see like your healthcare record. So if you have a diagnosis, especially since cannabis diagnoses have majority been of negative connotation, like cannabis use disorder and cannabis dependency, um, that can impact your insurability. So I think that there's a balance that we need to strike in the midst of all this as well. And with cannabis hyperemesis syndrome, I wanted to talk a little bit more about that because it is a concern for the medical community. It is a concern for utilization. We are doing a lot of GI testing when we should be asking more questions about cannabis. But my biggest concern is that we're not measuring any data, right? We don't have even the infrastructure in our medical records to capture this information in an organized way so that we can see if there's an uptick with cannabis hyperemesis syndrome, and then we can say, hey, what is kind of driving that? And because I'm both in the industry and in healthcare, I know that marketing is largely going towards high THC products and crystals and infuse and dabs, like all the really high potency. But I also, as a clinician, know that that's probably more likely to have you develop cannabis hyperemesis syndrome. So how do we build the public health guardrails to really to guide product development that does not have a negative impact on public health or create a crisis, like cannabis hyperemesis syndrome, that we're not quite prepared to even see? And I think that that's kind of where the questions have been going for me. But on the science side, I always wondered, like, what information about cannabis do you feel is most commonly missing today? And like when we say cannabis use, why do the details matter? And I think they matter for harm reduction, just like we have social drinking and then we have alcohol use disorder. We should have an acceptable spectrum of social cannabis use, therapeutic cannabis use, maybe cannabis dependency, and then maybe cannabis use disorder, like kind of align it in the same way. But what's missing? We're not even at the point where we're even capturing the information to be able to evaluate it and put it into like a harm reduction pathway. So what do you see that's missing the most?
I think what's missing the most is real care about the patients, for the growers, and then also the people that are making money off of cannabis, selling cannabis. Because you know, Uh, Natural cannabis, well, when I say natural, I just mean like wild cannabis. That's a better word for it. Wild cannabis that you find, well, you can't really find it anymore, but like when it grew naturally just out in the fields, right, and nobody was cultivating it, the THC and CBD percentage were 1-in-1 ratio. So that's how the plant is really meant to be. It might be 7 to 8% THC, 7 8% or 5% CBD, and that was what it was naturally. And then once we started cultivating it, even in the early days, it was still fine in terms of we didn't see hyperemesis. We didn't see Evali like that. And so all of these things are happening now, right? And then so when thinking about that, it's like, okay, so what has changed between, when cannabis was first being used? Because a lot of people don't know about the golden age of cannabis when this was on pharmacy shelves in the 1800s, right? So this was, widely accepted in the 1800s. It was on pharmacies. It was in the U.S. Pharmacopoeia, and so people were using it then. But they had it in tinctures and things like that. They were still smoking it, but the THC percentage around that time was 5%. Cannabis hyperemesis syndrome was not a thing. EVALI was not a thing. So now what I'm seeing is that it's a billion-dollar market. There's people trying to make money, and they know that people want to get high, and so they are manipulating the plant to have 25, 30% THC and no CBD, or 2% CBD and then a little bit of terpenes, sprinkle that in there. And so I just think that the cultivation of the plant is more about marketing than it is care for the patients. So I think empathy is missing, because, or I mean, I'm
Mhm.
just not, because for me, if you really look at the science, super high THC percentages are not healthy, and it's unnecessary. And then so, when you have things like that going on, you you run into things like Evali. And then let me just also break that down too.
I was gonna say, tell us a little more about Avali.
So yeah, Evali is just it's an e-cigarette or vaping use associated lung injury. Yeah, that's the so it's a acronym. And then so the acronym is EVALI, so e-cigarette or vaping use associated lung injury. And so obviously this was never a thing until vapes started to come into the market. And so you have, and then so that, and it's also referred to as popcorn lung. And a lot of that
Yes.
is you can see the oil in people's lungs, right? When they're doing the different x-rays and things like that. And so for me, it's really just about this high THC concentration. Some of these pens are 95% THC, and then they have thinners. They have thinners, E acetate, vitamin E acetate in it to thin it out. And then and also you have the heavy metals that seep into the oil when you're using it. And that will directly cause E-valley, and it will directly cause the where we just E-valley, and then also
And cannabis hyperemesis syndrome.
hyperemesis syndrome. Because what we're seeing with hyperemesis syndrome is that they've been linking it to like long-term chronic use, right? And I think that's accurate, but it's not fully accurate, because it's long-term chronic use, but it's long-term like extreme THC use. So that's what I think it is, right? And so because we're when you stop using it, when you stop using cannabis, you all the symptoms go away. So that's why I think for myself, it's not 100%. There's a lot of research with Evali. I think the first case was like 2007 or something like that, right? So it's like super, super new. Um, I mean, for hyperemesis and Evali, but both of them I think come from chronic use of extreme high THC products. And that to
Mm,
me has everything to do with marketing, everything to
mhm.
do with profits, and no empathy. And so for me, that's what's missing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking as you're talking, like if we were to track every cannabis hyperemesis syndrome or Valley case to product type, whether they sourced it from a legal dispensary or a smoke shop, or online, how they got it, or just how frequently they were using it, kind of the dose. I think like if we could see and track, we would do a great service to public health if we could actually start tracking and measuring where it's coming from. I think with cannabis, we're very eager to accept the negative story, and we're not eager to go into the root cause, right? Like we were like, oh, cannabis use disorder. Yeah, let's. They're using it. It's impacting all the other domains of their life. Let's put it there. But then nobody like kept moving into like what else can it look like and how else can it be used. We just like stuck to that. And with cannabis hyperemesis syndrome, I see the same thing where we're just like, it's cannabis because we want to make cannabis the villain, rather than saying there is a therapeutic aspect to consumption, and there is a product type that does not cause this. And for years and ages before commercialization of cannabis, like these things were not happening in healthcare settings. And let's give cannabis the chance to collect the data and prove its case like everything else did. I mentioned last week that we were able to see, like, how long did it take us to see that alcohol was bad, right? And how long did it take for public health to start informing the product types and the types of concentrations of alcohol that wouldn't lead to cirrhosis and death and dependency? Like, it took years because the data was all over the place. And then with the opiate epidemic, it took like less time because it was a medication. So when people started prescribing it more, we noticed it. We started nursing assessments, started documenting pain as the fifth vital sign. So people had to come up with a solution for pain, right? It's being documented. It's a quality measure. So healthcare responded with a knee-jerk reaction of like just increasing pain med access. And we saw what happened, but we only saw it because we had the data. So I think that that's where kind of I want to lean into next, and thinking about what data do we have, and if you were to design, right, a cannabis documentation framework or a data capture framework from scratch, like what would you need it to capture? What would you want to see?
So what are we capturing?
So let's say for research, for what you need in your practice, I'm always thinking about cannabis documentation. So I'm thinking like nursing intake and med reconciliation, and like kind of,
Mm.
I want to see how cannabis impacts people through the continuum of care at home. Do they have access? Where do they get their access? And how are people using it? And that's kind of like just the top of my mind. But for the work that you're doing, first, how about this? Let's back up one step. Tell us about kind of the work you're doing around data, and tell us like if you could design a system from scratch to capture this data, how would you capture it, and how
Okay.
do you use it?
Yeah. So the work that I do with data, I've always been just like interested in data, just like I developed an interest in cannabis, but not just data, just technology in general. And so for me, I when I went to grad school to get my master's degree in medical cannabis science and therapeutics, I realized that, what I realized was that there was a lot of medical research studies that I didn't know existed, but you have access to that through the university library. And then so when I graduated, I no longer had access to that, and I had an issue with that. And so for me, I just when there is an issue, like, and there's an idea and a problem, I either solve it myself, or I feel like, and then if I do solve it myself, if I feel like that is something that I think other people want and need, then I feel like I should build it. And so that's what I did with Cannabase. Right now, we have over 50,000 medical cannabis research studies on the platform. And you can filter, drill down all the information that you're looking for so that you can find studies that correlate with the topics and interests that you're looking for. You can filter through the country that it's in, how many studies, when it was released, the type of study. Um, the what type of medical condition is talking about it, what terpene is involved in the study. So you can drill down to find exactly the study that you're looking for. And then we update our database, our medical cannabis database, once a week. Where if there's ever any new articles uploaded, and then we also have a legal database on there as well to map that we update once a month. And so we update that once a month just to have all of the most recent medical cannabis laws on the platform as well. And so that's what it is right now. And then we also teach in person. So like right now, I'm teaching at Morehouse College in Clark Atlanta University, and the students are that I teach are using the platform to follow up on some of the things that we talk about um, uh, on the actual in person. They do use the online platform to expand some of those topics that they're learning about, and so that's my work with data, and that's what's live right now, like as you can see at canna-base.ai. And so I think for myself, I'm really teaching right now students, young college students, and so for myself, I am gathering some data currently from them in terms of just like how this class is affecting them and like what they do afterwards. And so in terms of like a lot of the students, they are there for disciplinary reasons, and so tracking their what they're doing afterwards. But then a lot of them are there because they uh, are biology majors or human science majors and things like that. And so a few of them have gone on to, go to the Morehouse School of Medicine graduate degree, where they get their master's in biotechnology and medical cannabis science and therapeutics. And so for me, like right now, it's about, I, I'm more into where like the young students on campus are using this plant incorrectly. They're using it at high amounts, right? Putting themselves at risk for hyperemesis, EVALI, things like that. And so for me, I'm really trying to um like it's the study I guess would be more of like a not a survey study, but it is like I'm following these students and they're giving me the information about how this class has affected what they're doing in their current life, and whether that's
Awesome.
professional or personal. There's students that before the class, every time they smoked, they were rolling 3 grams, or every time that they would smoke that amount, they would need something like that amount before they eat every time, right? There's students who were in high school and they were a part of the student government, they were student athletes, they did all these things, but now they have cannabis use disorder. And with cannabis use disorder comes a motivational syndrome, right? Where you lose all types of motivations for things that you love and liked when you were not addicted to cannabis. And so
Mhm.
I'm seeing these things, on campus. And so for me, it's hard for me to focus on anything else, um, uh, outside of that, because this is exactly the institution that I, was in, and now I'm in, more just a broader AUC. But for myself, I think that's something that I want to continue to gather that data. And I think for me, it's just like it's a longitudinal study, right? And I think for me, that is the best way for myself to capture this data, because I can have a semester of students that give me
Mhm.
one result, but then the next semester is a different result, but it's some similarities, and so there's different conclusions that I can draw. Right. So for me, I've been doing this since 2022 and I've been gathering this data. And so there's so many things that I've learned. But then as the laws change, as things change, then the students' behavior change. So I'm seeing, I know this was a hypothetical question, but I'm actually doing this in real time.
I love that. No,
Yeah.
that's a,
So,
I kid you not, like doing it in real time in cannabis and science is kind of how we have to function. We
mhm,
don't really we don't have a lane, right? Like we're just kind of trucking along trying to figure out our way. And because of like I was thinking about cannabis, I'm gonna just go out there. I'm gonna share I'm gonna add to the stage an image right here. This is our national healthcare visibility initiative. So I wrote a book. I all this research for me. I'm a writer, so I ended up writing a book. Healthcare cannot manage what it cannot see. I had the honor of having Dr. Deanna Summers, the president of the American Cannabis Nurses Association, write a foreword, as well as Kimberly Roy, our former Cannabis Control Commissioner here in Massachusetts, with the CCC, write a foreword, and kind of help support and guide the vision of this. Essentially, it's just like a wake up call to healthcare. And writing the book felt like, okay, we put it down, and then we started having these conversations, and then I was like these conversations need to be everywhere. And as a speaker and an author, we just decided to kind of take this on the road, and we're coming to Atlanta. We're actually coming to Morehouse as well. I was just in touch with Dr. Bid, I believe, from the medical school biotech
Yeah. Yep.
department, just kind of really arranging some conversations over at Morehouse. So I hope that when I'm there, I'm able to connect with you in
Absolutely.
person. But I was just thinking about just the data collection and sharing, because part of this visibility initiative is that we're going to a bunch of nursing institutions, nursing schools, hospitals, hospital grand rounds. I have clinicians, nurse practitioners, nurse educators, like a whole coalition of people that are going to be part of this initiative, really stakeholders having these conversations. And for the nursing schools, of course, they're going to get interested. And I was thinking, like, what a resource Cannabase is to point them to say, hey, this is a place where you can actually connect with all of this. I'd love to have you guys join us on this initiative. So I'm just kind of pitching to you in real time. And showing you kind of like the graphic. We're kicking off August 8th at a virtual summit. And it's literally going to be like just the mastermind of everybody who's pre-ordered the book and wants to really join in on this work. Your ticket to the summit is a book pre-order, or if you're a partner, of course, you get tickets to the summit. And then we're taking this on the road, and I'll be at the Georgia Nurses Association conference in Atlanta, and then we've partnered with the Elevated Food and Wine Festival team to bring Cannaversations down to Atlanta. She was actually talking about your bookstore and reaching out and connecting as that being kind of like the host for our conversation. But I think it's
Amazing.
important to like bring it down to the people. Like we cannot stay above. And the most important partnership of this tour is kind of like the partnership with Project Destigmatize Healthcare and bringing all the data capture. We're making strategic partnerships with some research infrastructure firms and connecting all the dots of what needs to be captured so that this initiative is not just an initiative, but turns into like a visibility database that allows us to build the appropriate infrastructure from the mouth, like the words from the people, what the nurses need in terms of what the workforce needs in terms of education, what the industry needs in terms of understanding, what patients need in terms of like trust and competency from our clinicians. Like, so it's not just me, it's not just you. It's like it's going to take a village. So I'm excited to be doing this and just kind of bringing this to all the places I already belong in and I already exist in. And I just continue to expand and invite the network in. I'll send you this and I'll take it off so we can continue the conversation. But I was like, this just felt too in real time necessary for us to capture and kind of talk through as we were having this conversation. I'm
No,
going to give you
that's
a moment to kind of react to that, and then we can just
yeah. No,
interview
I
going.
yeah, no, that's super exciting. And then it's such a small world. Because the fact that you are talking to Jay from Elevated Food and Wine. They just had, their event. I'm also, one of the owners and managers of Bookstore Gallery. And so that is, we have a lot of different conversations and events and things there that are cannabis related. So yeah, we would love to have you when you show up for that, and then also for the Morehouse School of Medicine, event. Would love to be involved in whenever you're doing and when you come down here in Atlanta. Yeah, because I just had a conference with Cannabase conference in April that Dr. Bid spoke at. Just trying to, make sure the students on campus know, because they're separate institutions, Morehouse College and Morehouse School of Medicine.
Yeah.
So a lot of the students at Morehouse College don't even really know about a lot of the things that are going on at Morehouse School of Medicine. So just making sure that they're educated on what is happening over there and what the options that they have. So definitely trying to work more with Morehouse School of Medicine as well. And so yeah, I would just more information on it, just shoot it over. But any way that we can participate, I would like to.
No, no, I'm excited about what Cannabis can do, especially for the upcoming workforce that's looking for information. As a clinician, when I became a patient, like I wanted the science. I didn't I didn't want the mush. I didn't want the marketing. I wanted to know, okay, how does this work? How does it metabolize? How is it going to interact with me?
Right.
And I did the work for myself, and I was just thinking like, I we should make this information more accessible to people so that if they want to look and if they know where to look. So I appreciate that Cannabis exists in that way. I want to shift a little bit into AI because I know that this is another part of your work and kind of what you're developing. And so my curiosity makes me ask, how do you see AI supporting cannabis science and healthcare decision making?
I think it democratizes it. And so for myself, there's a lot of goods and bad when it comes to AI that people like to talk about. And so I think for myself, you always have to think about both sides. And you know, so for when I answer that, I also want to just preface it that like I can't slow down anything that's going on with AI. And so I'm not a part of that elite group that can do that. And so do I think AI needs to slow down? Absolutely. I think that there needs to be some more guardrails. I think that the race to see who has the greatest and latest model does need to slow down. But because it is commercialized and it is available for everybody to use, I just personally can't see myself not using it if anybody who is my competitor is using it as well from a business standpoint. And so my use of AI solely comes from um, productivity, efficiency, and making our lives easier based off of what is currently available commercialized. And I think that's kind of like how I like to talk about it because when I do start talking about it, the environmental issues always arise, or there's just the different issues that arise with AI. So I always like to preface it with that. Like I know the other side of AI, and I know how fast it is moving. But from what I have access to, I think that I want to use it to be more productive with my team. And I think when we use it that way, we can compete against anybody. And so that's when I say it democratizes it. So for example, with cannabis, you have a small mom and pop dispensary, right? Or even people like myself at Bookstore Gallery, right? Where it's four of us. There's three owners, four employees. And so we are now able to compete with MSOs, right? And not in multi-state, but like there's MSOs here in Georgia, right? And so these MSOs, they come to us for certain things. And it's because of one, it's because we're rooted in the actual community and in the culture, and it's just different than an MSO. That is part of it, but the other part is that we have automations in place that do marketing for us while we are working in the shop, and so we have automations that on our social media, we have emails, all of these things that I've set up for our team. And so now with these AI automations, with these things that have been helping us, we are now able to free ourselves up time wise to where we're able to stay open later, where we're able to provide better products because we're able to have more conversations with people, because when there's a four-person team, and I think I'm talking about it lighter than what it is. When there's a four-person team running a dispensary, right? Like I wear about seven hats, and
Mhm.
then my business partner wears about 15 hats, and my other partner wears about 10, right? So it's just like but all of the, like, I would say 30 to 40% of those hats can be given to AI, right? And then that allows us to be better owners, better conversationalists with the people that we talk to. It's just a very different way that we're able to free ourselves up. And we don't have to spend more money on more employees. So we're able to have better products for people, and our overhead is lower. When the overhead is lower, we can provide better products. And as a person who, my entire reputation, everything I love is about having, I want to provide a good cannabis product. I want to provide a good product, right? And you can't do that if you have all these other things going on, because you need to pay rent, you need to pay your employees, you need to do all these things. And so when you get to a point where you can't handle all of that, the natural place to start cutting expenses is the product that you're giving them. And so we don't want to do that. That is not something we want to sacrifice. And that's why I think a lot of dispensaries find themselves, mom and pop shops find themselves in those similar situations where they need to decide whether they need to hire somebody or they need to have good product. Um, and so I think for myself, what I've seen firsthand is AI has allowed us to have, the same amount of service level, the same amount of quality assurance, and the same amount of marketing as an
Mhm.
MSO that is going to be, trying to come into Georgia and take over the game. And so for us, it democratizes it. We know how to use it. We know how to use it for our benefit as a business. And I think at the end of the day, the person that benefits from that is the patient or customer that comes and gets their products from us.
No,
So
I
yeah,
love that. I love that because I often think of AI as the assistant. I consider myself like a really complex thinker, prolific thinker. So when I open 10 tabs, typically they end up in like at the end, it's like the picture, but it's just in different areas of my brain coming out at different times.
right.
So it really helps me, like, if I know that the thread is one thread, I'm able to capture all the wild thoughts and it helps me synthesize them, right? Where I'm like, oh, that's what I was trying to say. So I think that that's like, it's a really cool tool if you're a creator to help you in your thinking. Um, but my concern always is when we lean on it to innovate, because it's never going to create what doesn't already exist. And I think that when we rely very heavily on it to create, we're just going to start like seeing this stagnation in innovation, that is harmful to people, and people are not going to want to create. They're going to want to like recycle from this big mass databases, and everything's going to start to look the same and sound the same, and that's a disservice to humanity, in my opinion. Um,
Yeah. I think on that note too, right? I think there is an over like people rely too much on AI. I think AI is most useful when you also use your brain.
mhm,
And so there's some people that use AI for everything in terms of problem solving, like you said, right? Like innovation comes from solving problems. And so when you have a problem, you don't run to AI to try to solve it for you. That's never been done in the history of mankind, right? So I think that's the issue, right? Especially with young students, right, who are in school and using it, like they're not learning anything. And so for myself, that's why Cannabase only uses AI to aggregate information. So we honestly, and I've even thought about removing the .ai from it, because we only use it to organize the studies. We use it to automate the new studies flowing into our database so that I don't have to check the internet for new studies, but we can still have an updated database, right? So we use it to check all 50 states state government website for updates on cannabis laws, right? So I'm using it to aggregate information and to have information be current, but I'm never using it for actual, like, putting like for actual trying to discover something with cannabis, or you know putting out something from me directly, right? So it's more about using it in a way that is productive, so and can make things easier, but I'm never using it as a way to try to figure out, like, I'm not using it in my research to figure out what's going on with the students, right? AI can't tell me what's going on with the
Yeah.
students in a longitudinal study, right? So
Mhm.
that's something that I have to do. But to organize that data and put it into an Excel sheet so that it's easier for me to digest, that's when I'm going to use AI. So
That's
it's just different, and I think people get it misconstrued on how they should be using it, rather than just relying on it. Because at some point, you're not going to need your brain anymore. You're just going to have
right.
AI, and so that's detrimental to society, like you were saying.
Oh my gosh. I see it. I have teenagers, and I often I'm in awe at their inability to troubleshoot. They just don't like. They're like, "What next, mother?" And I'm like, "Well, think your way through it, my friend." Like,
Yeah. Yeah,
um,
like yeah,
it's
yeah.
always interesting. It's always interesting. This has been so good, Justin. Um, I wanna give you a moment to just, if you have any last words for our audience. You are typically looking at regulators, clinicians, people in public health, researchers, scientists. Like, if you had like one takeaway message from our conversation today, I'm gonna let you just say your piece, and then I'll close this out.
Yeah, I think for myself, you know, cannabis is it's a super unique drug. And I think that we've all been tricked. We've all been tricked and bamboozled. That cannabis is um not anything that has to do with medical use. And so I would just plead with medical practitioners to just don't be afraid of, trying to find different programs that offer CME credits that are cannabis related. And with that, I'll do a shameless plug, to where that, we have an event in Atlanta. We're partnering with Patients at a Time. That's going to be in early November, where we're going to have CME credits available, where practitioners will be able to learn. And in addition to that, what Cannabase is right now is what I talked about in terms of it being more of a search engine and database. But I'm taking all of my courses that I teach in person and putting them online. Um,
Yes.
and so, I want people to have access to these things. Um, and so I would say, even until then, though, until I have resources readily available online for people to watch and things like that, there's already CME opportunities available, that you can go and learn more about cannabis. And I think you and your patients will feel the benefits from that education. And so that's really it. There's nothing that practitioners are doing wrong, right? This is a systemic issue. And so practitioners grew up or learned and matriculated through the system, right? So it's not their fault, but it is on them now that they do know, right, that there's something missing. That's why CME exists. And now it is on them to go ahead and to learn it, and so that they can be the best physician that they can possibly be. But yeah, that is what I would leave with. Thank you so much for having me. This was very enjoyable. Like, I love talking about this. I could talk about it for another hour if needed. So
I
yeah.
kid you not. Like, listen, when you know better, you do better, Justin, right?
Yeah.
So this is what we're trying to just share with the community. I hope this opens everyone's door of curiosity. Justin, thank you for joining us and sharing your expertise today. You've helped us understand that disclosure is only the beginning. And if healthcare is going to learn from cannabis, and improve patient safety and generate meaningful evidence, we need systems that support consistent documentation and that support better data and greater clinical visibility. Like, this is like the core principle of the National Healthcare Visibility Initiative.
Mm.
and why we're taking this on the road, because healthcare cannot manage what it cannot see. Like, we literally cannot. So thank you again, Justin, for helping us think about what healthcare needs to measure, document, and understand. Like, more importantly, understand to move forward. And thank you to anyone who's watching us today. We look forward to continuing the conversation in our next session. Until then, remember, we need data, we need disclosure, we need documentation, and we need harm prevention. Thank you for joining us. So let's talk cannabis and healthcare. I'm gonna